There's a whole host of passages that build from or dip into or connect to a supernaturalistic worldview that unfortunately the church has lost because the church filters the content through its own traditions. It distills the content into little bite-sized morsels and calls that the whole counsel of God. What we tend to do in Christian tradition is the white hats are angels, the black hats are demons. Well, the text of Scripture doesn't really conform to that. Deuteronomy 32:8-9, when the Most High divided up the nations, when he fixed their boundaries and their borders, he fixed their number according to the number of the sons of God. Now that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls say. It's what the new RSV says, ESV, NLT. The number of modern translations will follow the Dead Sea Scrolls. Other ones don't. They'll read Sons of Israel instead of Sons of God. And Sons of God is the demonstrably correct reading because of the Dead Sea Scroll material. If you think about the Babel event and say, well, why would God divide up the nations according to these Sons of Israel? That's the traditional reading that a lot of Bibles still have. It doesn't make any sense because Israel didn't exist at the time of Babel. And so people wonder, well, what do we do with that? Well, the real answer is that isn't what the original text actually said. And we wouldn't really know any of that had it not been for the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the Septuagint also matters a lot. What the Septuagint sort of does, because it's Greek, is the translators of the Septuagint looked at all of this vocabulary for both good guys and bad guys in the supernatural world. And they more or less made the decision that we're going to call the good guys angeloi, messengers, angels, and we're going to call the bad guys daimonion, demons. The early church grew up on the Septuagint. And there it's all angels and demons. Most Christians in the church make some assumptions. Not only do we have things we know, but we also have to recognize that there are things that we don't know are false. Illustration. We sort of assume certain things about the members of the heavenly host, that they can't create their own embodiment.
That was my question. If they're like God, then He made us out of clay.
God has to do it for them.
Oh,
where's the verse for that?
Yeah.
There is no verse for that. We assume that their free will sort of is taken away or like cemented and frozen after these three rebellions. Where's the verse for that? Again, we actually have verses in that case the opposite of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the angel of light.
A couple times God says He doesn't trust His holy ones. He assigns flaws and errors to them. In other words, God knows what He's getting. It doesn't mean that they're all just waiting to sin. It just means that they're not Him, and God knows it.
Yeah,
they can make mistakes. They can rebel. They can go astray. I mean, in other words, they have that track record. So this sense that everything is now set in stone, that's a Christian myth. A lot of what Christians think they know about angels and demons, again, they is a derivative of something taught in tradition.
Mm-hmm.
That we actually don't have a verse for or against, some of these ideas. So,
right.
We have to be able to know what we can think about, but again, recognize our limitations in terms of the conclusions we can draw.
Yeah.
The origin of demons is they are the disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim. That's why they seek re-embodiment. That's why they possess. They want to be re-embodied. Now you say, well, where is any of that in the Bible? You get hints of it, believe it or not, in the Old Testament. Where? Well, you have to realize that the term Rephaim in the Old Testament was not like in Canaanite literature. That term was just used of great warriors of renown, like deity, quasi-deity kings, in the different populations like Ugard or Mesopotamia or whatever. Rephaim in the Bible is used for those guys. That's Isaiah 14 language. But it's also used of guys that inhabit Sheol, the underworld. Isaiah 14 does that as well. Ezekiel 32. There's a handful of passages that have the Rephaim in hell. Okay, I mean, in the underworld. This is where they live. This is their domain. This is where they belong. Just like where we would think of the New Testament, this is where demons live, right? They come out, they pop out, they possess some people for a while, then they get punished and go back or whatever. This is, this idea that you find in the New Testament that basically never gets examined. People ask, where do demons come from, and nobody seems to have an answer because they haven't read all this other literature. Again, a Second Temple Jew would go, well, duh, where were you in school? How did you miss out? They would have an answer for this, but that's what a demon is. And some of this is reflected in, some of the things Jesus says or what happens in some of these encounters and whatnot, some of the vocabulary. But those are different than the principalities and powers. Those are the sons of God who transgress in the wake of the Babel event. I still do not believe that when God appoints the sons of God and assigns them to the nations at Babel, I don't think that they're bad guys then. I think that they are just normal members of the heavenly host. And for some reason, they're free will beings, so that's part of it.
Some become bad, some less bad.
Well, what they do, you have to look at Psalm 82 and ask yourself, why is God angry with them? And it's very clear why God is angry with them, because they sow chaos among the nations.
When it comes to the world of the powers of darkness, there are certain things that are just on the table. There's death. Death is a big one. There is disorder or chaos. Those things are 180 degrees removed from the world God created for the human family that he wanted at the very beginning. They are anti-Eden. Now things accrue to that. There will be agents of death. There will be agents of disorder, these supernatural beings. Their activity is going to get described through either vocabulary or symbol or metaphor. Leviathan was a very familiar symbol in the ancient world, not just in Israel and Canaan, but just broadly. This great dragon of the sea as being a metaphor for chaos. The dragon lives in the sea. The sea is a place that was feared. Why? Because you can't live in it. If you try to go live in the water, you're going to die. Okay? It's threatening. It's unpredictable. It can be calm one minute, and the next minute, it's going to take your life. The things that live in it are foreign to you because you live on the land. You're used to seeing the creatures there. But when you're out on a boat for a long period of time, you're going to see things that you've never seen before, and you don't really know how to process them. And the writers are using things that are familiar, unfavorably, okay, to describe spiritual threats to a human being. Again, it's a very simple strategy, and when you really think about it, it's very effective. So if you wanted to know, who or what is on the opposing team, okay, what's the roster? You have things like death. You have destruction. You have wastelands. You have wilderness and desert. You have the creatures that live in these places that consume death, that are responsible for death, that if you go there would threaten you. Even after battle scenes, will figure into this. Places that are very clearly under God's judgment. Why? Because there's lots of dead people there. And the way those particular things are talked about in many cases are linked to Babylon. Why? Because Babylon is the chief enemy of the people of God, not only in the Old Testament, but people have a memory of that. And so they will use Babylon in the New Testament to testify to earthly threats. Again, linking these ideas to talk about human agents of chaos that oppose God and oppose God's people, and also supernatural agents that oppose God and oppose God's people. For the biblical person, these two worlds function symbiotically, and the same set of tools could be used to describe either and both.